getting closer. I mean, they were pretty well short of the votes. They had the 16 votes. You need 24 for the majority. That's a pretty big gap. So really the sense coming out of the owners' meetings was there was enough respect for the competitiveness of the play among a lot of the coaches and teams where it's like it's just hard to ban a play that people are good at. I think the league was also affected a little bit by how one team in particular, the Eagles, were targeted in this. Where when they changed rules, they want it to be, sort of a league-wide issue as opposed to just a niche problem or so-called problem. So there wasn't as much momentum as I thought. I was talking to a lot of people leading up to the owners' meetings that thought that they would pass under the guise of player safety. That was kind of the line I got multiple times from, checking with team executives and people around the league, but it didn't go that far. So the competition committee or whoever's behind wanting to get it passed has a couple months until the May meetings to try to push it through and get the votes because it probably will be voted on again. But I could see it being tweaked to where it's more of just a general pushing and pulling issue as opposed to the particular tush-push play.
Jeremy, can I say, though, it's something we observed. Did you see the people who were against banning it? Aaron Glenn, Dan Campbell, obviously the Eagles themselves, Dan Quinn, like the people who were vocal saying don't ban it. It seemed like there's a sort of a football guy, old school mentality. Mike Vrabel. It seems like it's the old guard versus the we get our eyebrows waxed crowd. Much different. Not to get too much on Matt LaFleur.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I don't know if I'd go.
I'm glad I made you laugh this morning.
Together. Yeah. I'm with you. I mean, Sean McDermott's a former Eagles coach. He's a football guy, and he's against it.
Oh, he's out. We've expelled him from Philly now. He's no longer.
Oh, he's a hypocrite. He's a hypocrite because he says he wants it banned because of player safety, and yet they run it the second most times in the NFL, and he's on record saying that if it's not banned, he will continue to use it. That's hypocrisy.
Right. Well, you take advantage of the rules that are in place, and if the rules change, then you readjust. But yeah, I did think Raheem Morris made a decent point where you're saying like you're a little nervous of that sort of torpedo play where you have a 300-pounder just going really low and deep into a play like that among 22 people. There is. I know there's not a lot of injury data, and they're going to have to come with some more data that's convincing if they want any chance to get this reversed. But there is some sentiment for that type of play being an issue and just trying to avoid any sort of catastrophic injury in that regard.
When it comes to the NFL draft, Jeremy, obviously there's going to be your early run on quarterbacks. What do you expect to see in the first round? Last year, it was, 16 picks before we saw the first defensive player come off the board. Do you think there's going to be anything as drastic this year early on?
I don't. I don't necessarily think there's going to be a quarterback run. It's just not that kind of class. We'll see where Shedeur Sanders ends up. He's being considered by teams like the Browns, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of momentum for him to go top 3 at the moment. So, where does he slide? Where does he fit? Does Jackson Dart really get pushed up as much as people think? I know people around the league I talked to are sort of trying to figure that out. Like, is he really going in the top 10 or top 20? These are quarterbacks that people don't have first-round grades on, but yet they get pushed up because of the nature of the position. I still kind of go back to that 2022 Kenny Pickett quarterback class that was pretty bad overall. This one isn't considered quite as bad, but when it's a weak class, typically teams refrain from pushing him too high. Taking a guy you have a second-round grade on and putting him in the top 3. It's just a kind of a tough sell. So I still think like Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter will be among the sort of top 3 or 4 players taken, as opposed to a quarterback outside of Cam Ward. Defense, I just don't see the same run as last year where you had all the offensive players going in the top half. Pretty well-balanced defensive crew this year, and there aren't a lot of good offensive tackles that are going to go super high. There aren't a lot of wide receivers that are going to go super high. I think those players will be more in the teens. So as a result, you're going to have certainly some star defensive players that I think will be well-positioned to go pretty high.
And, Jeremy, you see the way that the Eagles may be being targeted by this whole new tush-push legislation. I wonder about the same thing about trades. When do people stop trading with Howie Roseman? Because we're all talking about he has the biggest war chest of draft picks over the next 2 drafts. But I wonder, at what point do teams not want to trade with Howie Roseman because he's had a really good success rate of fleecing people.
Well, he has, but I think the flip side of that is every team has a different situation. Like, you might, on paper, you could say, like, yeah, he fleeced some teams, but he's also sort of capitalizing or taking advantage of a team situation where it is best for them to trade that particular player because that player might fit with what the Eagles do but doesn't fit with Team X right now because of whether they're losing or the contractual situation. So, Howie's able to acquire players at the right time that work for him that might not work for the other team where they need to make that trade. So a lot goes into it, and it's interesting this offseason. You did see, or at least maybe in recent months, I felt like I saw less splash trades in part because, like, look at Trey Hendrickson right now, right, with the Bengals. He wants to be paid over $30 million per year. Great player, 30 years old, and you have to give up a lot to get him. Like the Bengals at one point wanted a first-round pick for that. Like, teams are having a hard time now making the big splash trade, giving up a high pick and paying somebody what the market prices are right now are just really, really high and sort of a sticker shock issue. So it's instead of trades, teams are leaning more toward what the Eagles did, and you draft good players and pay them early. That seems to be more of the trend than the actual trades right now. So, and with the Eagles, by the way, with trades, I'm fascinated to see what they do with Bryce Huff. Like, I still have him on my radar leading up to the draft. They owe him a lot of money. Like, it's clearly a situation, I think, where they're going to admit the mistake and move on at some point. I think of the 49ers with Robert Saleh and his connection to Bryce Huff. He really liked him in New York. Like, I could see something like that maybe coming together at some point.
Speaking of...
That's the next Howie trade I have on my radar.
All right.
And we will be keeping an eye on that. We will remember you saying it. Speaking of trades, it's inevitable that it looks like Dallas Goedert will no longer be an Eagle at some point this offseason. I do want to know, though, what's the market for an oft-injured 30-year-old tight end in the NFL where you can find tight ends nowadays in the draft? It almost seems like left and right. Still a very talented player, but the injury history is a big part of his career. Are there teams that are really eyeing up Dallas Goedert?
Well, I haven't heard a lot of momentum on that yet. I know around free agency, this first started to kind of get broached and it became a topic or a possibility. And, Dallas Goedert has been a top tight end for a while now. Yeah, I do think he has value despite his age and some of the injuries. I do. Now, a lot of these things come down to money and what you want to pay a player. He's got 1 year left on his contract, so does he need a new deal or an extension? My guess is yes, or if you're going to make that trade, you at least want to work something out where you can get the player for multiple years at a rate that's sort of a win-win for the player and the team. So, he's well-rounded enough. He can still get out and make something happen after the catch a little bit. He's a tough blocker. He's a good all-around player, so I do think he has value. But it was funny. I remember hearing, like, maybe during the season around October, like, a couple people would tell me, hey, like, just watch for Goddard. Like, he's been great there. But there's a feeling that maybe Eagles could get younger and a little cheaper at that position. So it looks like that's going to happen at some point. If they can't find a trade, maybe they just release him. Maybe that's best for the team and the player at that point. But I think they'll be able to swing something around draft time. We'll see what happens.
Jeremy, we appreciate the time as always.
Always appreciate you,
Thank
buddy.
you so much. We'll be bugging you again down the road, especially before the season starts. 150 days. John has the countdown going on
150
already.
to the Eagles opener. I'll see you there.
See you there, my man.
Take care, buddy.
There he is, Jeremy Fowler from ESPN on the Comcast Business Hotline. All right, we'll react to some of the stuff he said next. Bryce Huff, interesting. He brought that up on his own.
He did.
Also,
thank you so much for checking out our content on the 97.5 The Fanatic YouTube channel. Hope you enjoyed the video. And remember, you can always be checking the playlist. There may be something you missed from one of our shows during the day that you want to go back and check out. So every time you like a video, like it, subscribe to the channel, and you'll have that great content coming to you every single day. You're greatly appreciated.